Is Fate Stay Night a complete story? Seriously, I'm not asking a rhetorical question. Is Fate Stay Night, as it stands without the Illya route, a complete and whole story? Now, before you accuse me of being an Illya simp, which fair enough I suppose, let me rephrase that question, because it's not just asking where's the Illya route. No, this question is asking about the entire visual novel. To truly answer that question is to find out everything we can about that elusive fourth route, and Fate Stay Night's, oh boy, less than conventional production. So, let me take you down the very trail I walked to reach the answers that I have today, right now, in this very moment. Spoiler warnings, it's a lot, and also very, very little. So, let's begin. In my typical morning ritual of waking up and immediately coping for the loss of an Illya route, I had an epiphany. What if it's not just that it was canceled? What if there's even more to the story? Some elusive, tangible bits of content out there that I just hadn't come across. After all, I had seen a few in the character materials book that I had bought a few months prior. Plus, I've heard claims about what was going to happen in this route, like, for instance, the Day 9 route split between her and Sakura's route, or even that it was going to be on a whole other disc titled Fate Other Night. The idea of wanting to learn about these two elements eventually drove me out of a long burnout, and I quickly began what was supposed to be just a reading session and, a quick Google search. So, grabbing the book that is literally always less than an arm's length away from me as I sit here, I quickly turned to page 174, a book that those of you who watched the character designs video should already know pretty well. That being, of course, the character materials book. I took exactly one thing away from this book about the Illya route. That being that Takuchi's libido is responsible for literally all of the elements that would have been in it. That's not an exaggeration. He was the one who went to Nasu about doing Fate after Tsukihime, who, when looking at the old servants and masters, said that a Lolita-type character should be Berserker's master. The whole cute girl monstrous threat dynamic. Originally, Berserker's master was this whack job looking priest, which prototype looks interesting, but I'm glad that was changed. As I was saying, explicitly, the man was adamant about wanting to draw more maids post-Tsukihime, though not in the same style. No, that'd be boring. It's gotta be the military nurse style. Never accused Takuchi of being a man with a single-track mind. While he may have a knack for drawing a certain familiar face, it's all about the outfits with him. Apparently it's that little military nurse detail that made Nasu, who was stuck in his no-maid ways, relent to his friend. This all isn't to insult Takuchi, mind you. We don't kink shame here. We kink appreciate. From those little interactions between the two, you can quickly surmise that Illya is a bit of a collaborative work. Personally, I dread to think of what the visual novel would be like without both working in tandem. Maybe something like that shelved Fate that came after Prototype but before Stay Night. Oh yeah, if you think the watch order is bad, my god, trying to figure out the timeline of Stay Night's production is so much worse. Type Moon needed better naming conventions, but I suppose I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here. For now, what did this book have on a potential Illya route? A surprising amount of conceptual stuff, actually. First, we have this iconic sketch that lolicons around the world have clamored over since 1/30/2004. Notably, Hiroyama of Prillia fame was quite broken up over the loss of an Illya H scene in both Stay Night and Hollow Ataraxia. If Hiroyama only knew that Stay Night Illya had already peaked. And speaking of peaks, while choosing between black and white underwear was a concept brewing over at Type Moon, you might have also heard about a certain pair of maids taking part in this most salacious of scenes. But actually, that's all theoretical hullabaloo. The answer is a hard maybe at most. See, Takashi had this habit of sketching down stuff he thought was hot or neat. Notably, Illya's pajamas, and notably, this sultry-looking Sella. But the tagline next to the image reads, "We had plans for an intimate scene with Illya, and I drew this piece to explore the possibility of tying the maids into the scene." So, contrary to popular belief, the maids might have not even been a part of the scene at all, had an Illya route happened. Though Illya's pajamas did eventually find use in Hollow Ataraxia, so who knows how that four-way might have developed had the route been given time to roost. The maids were kind of shafted in Stay Night, as I'm sure you know, and even in a potential Illya route, it seems like that wouldn't have changed much, as like Himuro, Saguse, and Makidera, they were last-minute additions to sate Takashi's bottomless maid-loving lust. And also, just to make the cast feel more complete. Thank Arihiko if his comedic prowess was divided by 5, and then those 5 parts were all fed to Liz, leaving the rest struggling to keep up. That sentiment of underdevelopment only rings true for the story department though, as in every other aspect, for the maids at least, Takashi was thorough. In his grace, he designed undergarments for them. And all of this was a fairly quick process, apparently. The man just wanted maids, and even though no one but him might have known what lay under those garments for years, he would. And isn't that what really matters? But the unknown can be just as fascinating as the details we have now, as even Takashi has no idea what Illya's command spells look like when she turns around. He never designed them, and unless I'm mistaken, still hasn't to this day. You know what was designed, however, and profusely so? Illya's design. Not the finalized one, I've already talked about that. The prototype ones. No, not that. The ones made over Fate Stay Night's development. Yeah, these. See, these designs and the quotes Nasu and Takashi say about them, and then what they go on to say about Illya and her appearance in the visual novel proper are a little conflicting. See if you can gather what I'm talking about from these excerpts. First, from our made man Takashi, "This is the very first iteration I drew of Illya. The concept was a little girl who is so very dark on the inside, yet purely innocent on the outside. Since we already had a good on the inside but dark on the outside character, I focused on producing the exact opposite of that. I think the facial expression in this draft is the closest thing to what I feel is the real Illya." Interesting, and what did the seminal writer of Akia's H scene in Tsukihime have to say about these matters? "I personally liked our first draft of Illya the best. I believe we refined her image while looking at these pieces of early concept art," said while indicating the drafts in Fate side material. What an odd thing to bring up. I wonder what that is. Oh well, I'm sure it's not important. But yeah, these quotes are a little interesting, aren't they? Oh, which reminds me, what did they have to say about her and the rest of the interview? Probably shouldn't have closed the book if I'm gonna find this stuff, but you know, I am curious how they reflect on Illya's character. "We had designed Illya to be a heroine to some degree, so I guess you could say she started off with some wifely attributes. But those kind of faded away as the character evolved. Looking back at it now, however, I think it was better for Illya's character that way." Then Nasu replies, "Yeah, Illya's not really the wife type. She's more like a daughter, if anything. The love you feel for her is the kind that makes you want to protect her." Then Takashi replies, "If the 3 heroines were to be Shiro's wives, Illya would definitely be his little sister." So both agreed that her initial design was better for showing off her more original aspects beyond the sisterly vibes, but still have a mutual agreement that her role in Heavensfeel is the be-all end-all, despite also agreeing that her initial design was better just that initial concept for was the best they ever did. You can say I'm twisting quotes if you want to, but both Nasu and Takashi say it all over this interview that they prefer Illya's original concept. Again, not to say there isn't love for what we got. If the 15 plus years since Fate Stay Night's inception have been any indication, Illya staying in that Emoto role is definitely the status quo from here on out. But there's always that slight yearning for what could have been. More so when Nasu states his distaste for Heaven's Feel proper, saying something along the lines of it was too convoluted in the first Heaven's Feel Blu-ray interview. Let's just find that, shall we? I was of the opinion that if Heaven's Feel were to be adapted, it would need major surgery. Like transplanting the same brain into a different body, I would need to rebuild Heaven's Feel from the ground up in order to have it have dramaturgy befitting of the year 2017. Interesting stuff, but I'm not gonna lie, I do appreciate some of those initial designs we got just slightly more than that final one. I agree with Takashi, that gaze she gives off in that initial one he drew just encapsulates everything about her character that you need to know. The colorization is a bit off, but say with the color scheme she got in the visual novel proper, combined with maybe some leggings to really bring it home, and I think you'd have one of the best character designs in Fate. But if you're curious about my thoughts on more character designs, I've already made an entire video about that, which you should definitely watch. If you're wondering where to find it, right here, somewhere. Alright, more sweet Illya lore. It wasn't brought up in the visual novel, but Berserker, or as he's properly known, Heracles, was apparently summoned from either the same stone that his axe sword was made from, or in the same temple where that stone was acquired from. Maybe that would have been in the Illya route, I don't know, but while we're here, let's just toss all the good bits from episode 15 of UBW into the mix, as I'm fairly certain those had to have been taken from some of Nasu's old notes. Yeah, see, this is all starting to come together to form a little Illya route stew, isn't it? A stew that may be all broth at the moment, but hey, that's something, right? I guess the last thing to bring up before we dive into hell together is this quote by Nasu about nerfing Berserker because it would ruin the game balance. Which, again, stems from that early version of Fate, not prototype, I'm just going to refer to it as the Fate Beta from here on out. Well, we're done talking about the character materials book. That means turning to the internet to find out more. I hope you're ready for this journey we're about to go on, because finding out about Fate Other Night and the other elusive elements of the Illya route, well, as you'll soon find out, they're kind of an enigma to find fucking anywhere. Let's start from the beginning. First, this wonderfully written Reddit post by my good friend Khaled Winter. See, this post details everything you could want to know about the Illya route. And as a matter of fact, if you look through it, we can already see some of the aforementioned points from the character material book. Points like the Illya H scene, a relationship between Illya and Shiro, and the like. So, hey, automatically I'm seeing some credibility points. But if we start to look closer, we can see some more choice points. Such as when the route would split between Illya and Sakura with the choice to be Illya's superhero, abandoning everything for her, and yes, even the holy grail of this search, Fate Other Night. In particular, it talks about the conjecture in the community that it was cut due to either price to produce or not to soil Type Moon's name with the lolicon elements. But as Winter brings up, we're talking about a Type Moon who had just released Kagetsu Toya 3 years earlier, with all the remarkable services that that visual novel entails. So personally, I don't buy that one. Though Mr. Winter's post said that it might have also been due to the fear that the back half wouldn't sell as well. So Nasu shelved it. Despite Kagetsu and Tsukihime selling well enough that Type Moon could still continue to work on both Melty Blood and Fate at the same time, but I digress. If that was the case, then I genuinely did want to know at this point. And with all that in mind, I checked to see where Winter cited his sources. I trust his info well enough, man's taught me a lot of this stuff after all, but this is no casual conversation, this is real matters of the heart, you know? And Winter, I love you, man, but for the love of God, cite your sources. This isn't just about him, though. Anyone out there who's never cited their sources properly in English class, this video is, in a way, your fault. It doesn't need to be in any type of format, but at least leave a link or something. The character material book was brought up, yes, but that's only half the story. What about the times Fate Other Night was mentioned? What about when the route split was mentioned? Like, you have to have a source for where this information came from, after all, or it's just more conjecture. Not wanting to bother my friend who is currently AFK at the moment and thinking it'd only be a simple search away, I dove deeper. First of all, searching for the Illya route only brought up fanfiction, my own lovely videos, and those classic Reddit threads which aren't exactly known for factual information. Seeing as most of my information thus far had come from an interview in the form of the character material book, I figured Nasu's interviews would be the best place to start. Now, while the Type Moon wiki may have the wrong picture of Satsuki Yumizuka up, the fucking degenerates, they do have a pretty good list of interviews. So begins the process of clicking on an interview, Control F ILLYA, or the less common, ILYA. As this process continued for around the first 20-ish interviews, I very soon found myself closer to the end of the proverbial rope. In the interviews documented on this list, Illya is brought up 6 times. Sweet Sachan is brought up more in the first 20 interviews than Illya. A fact that brought me personal pain, but hey, a neat piece of Satsuki lore was attained in the process. Sadder part is, 4 of those are just Nasu saying his classic line of, Illya out? Nah, we already got Prilya, baby. I should clarify, I love Prilya, but Stay Night Illya and her are far from the same character, which is another video for another time. I should note as well that I consistently used both spellings of Illya and Illya throughout each site I visited, yet nothing.
Just dust and echoes.
But of those 2 interviews listed, was anything substantial, anything of substance really brought up? Well, yes, actually. But conversely, God, no. One interview from the UBW Blu-ray release does talk about a cut element from the Fate beta, that being the Scorch Ritters, as Nasu puts it. Being able to make a familiar from her own hair was in the original draft. So these are an original element to be brought back now to flesh out the Einsburn lore just a little more. So unlike the Angra elements, which were added due to, reasons, if you want to know why that was, click the video linked up top. We can call these elements fair game for the Illya route. To fanboy about the Scorch Ritters real quick, look at how cool these things are! Just seeing these makes me personally realize how much we missed out on with the loss of an Illya route. A really good find adding to our slowly expanding catalog of lore. With eyes full of wonder out of actually finding something after clicking through 20 interviews, I headed to the Heavensfield 2 interview included in the limited edition Blu-rays with a heart full of hope. It's only once I got to the actual, most memeable line in Fate lore that I swiftly realized there was nothing of substance here. Quote being, it was a day for Shiro and Sakura when referring to Dai Lorelei. Ah, man, Pseudo, why do you have to do this to me then go and make Heavensfield 3 so good? Though, maybe these movies work better when you watch them back to back. I'll have to test my theory on that once the Blu-rays come out for the 3rd movie. I'd go check them out right now just to test that little hypothesis, but no, I'd rather not. The other mentions of Illya in this interview were Pseudo talking about why he cut the Illya content he did, and my Katawaki interview, which, while cute, isn't the tale we're chasing today. So, of all those interviews, one good point was attained and not a lick about Other Night. From here, I employed a tactic that I should have just done from the start. That being Googling it, which doesn't lead to much. A Reddit poll and this page on the Type Moon fandom website that is blank, save for one reply with 2 links. Starting with a more plausible lead, I clicked the top link first, which leads us to another site with another link on it, and a keyword. Fate Secret Book. This seemed to hint towards there being more than just one complete material books out there. Maybe this is the lead I've been looking for? Clicking the link instinctively to see where this path leads, we find a dead end. Damn! Oh, wait, Wayback Machine. This is a website from 2005. It's only natural that it isn't taken care of, right? Thankfully, October 28th, 2006 had a screenshot. So let's see what's here. An issue of Comp Ace and, oh, I see Melty Blood was mentioned. Probably promo for the PS2 Act Cadenza release, but not much else is here. Though, fun fact, this is the magazine Prillia is serialized in nowadays. That's 2 years down the line from this publication though, and from what I'm seeing through the eyes of Google Translate, there's not even a mention of Fate. So, back to square one. Secret material up next, as just searching for Other Night is seemingly a lost cause at this point. Secret material led it to an eBay link and the same site I had just left. Honestly, if it has more Illya route secrets in store, it might just be worth the investment. Not a bad price honestly, though sadly, I can't read Japanese. Still too stubborn to just ask where my friend got his sources, I turned to Wikipedia to take a gander at their cited sources. My English teacher would turn her nose, but fuck you, Miss Hayes, Wikipedia is a valid source. And a source that led me to a myriad of other things. Secret material was brought up, but it linked back to the same website with the magazine. Do you guys ever get that feeling of deja vu? There is something kind of wild under the history section, though. See, apparently, they did a demonstration of Stay Night all the way back in March of 2003 at a place called Tech Gain, a showcase for adult visual novels that's still going strong to this day. You can actually play this early version from almost a year before Stay Night's release right now. It's a bit jank to get started. You need to have your system accommodate for Windows XP and lower and change your locale to Japan, but it works like a charm. To get slightly ahead of myself, this would have been released around the time Nasu was blending the Sakura and Illya routes into one after the Other Night idea was canned. Because of that, they have little to no presence in this little teaser. However, Illya gets a little scene near the end of it with her in the stuffed animal store that wasn't in the visual novel, so we can assume it took place in her route, especially considering the other heroine scenes in this teaser can still be found in the visual novel proper. Man, when I saw this 5 seconds of bliss, I was almost as ecstatic as that one time I dreamt about drinking Satsuki piss. Also, this is done by a completely different translation team than Mirror Moon, called Insani. Subjective nitpick incoming, but either the translation is a bit too wordy, or the script needs more revision, because man does it get more contrived than your average middle schooler's first fanfic. Specifically, when Ren flashes back mid-fight and says, "It was 10 years ago to the day." As well, Ren's sprite shows up in the prologue, and the CG of Ren summoning Archer is a very noticeable thing to be missing. Both of which would of course be changed in the final release. Its peculiar feel is emblematic of a very confused time in Stay Night's development. In spite of Ren and Saber's routes being largely completed at the time. I mean, if we look at this little teaser at the end, it's CGs from their routes exclusively that show up. It's such a shame that this doesn't touch the back half of Fate, but understandable considering the amount of cuts being made behind the scenes. Oh, wait, what's this? Fate side material? I feel like I've seen that before. And I can still get it if I pre-order by 12/23/2003, and it releases alongside the visual novel on 1/30/2004? Oh, well, hell, I better go get the wallet. Or, just look at this neat translation that surprisingly does exist all these years later. But before we get into what's contained within that little interview, let's talk about all the other places where this most sacred of information potentially could have been found. It's easy to weed out what probably wouldn't be it. I mean, the Dean anime character materials book, the Ren and Saber portrait books, and the visual collection probably aren't going to talk about Illya route elements, especially the Ren and Saber portrait books. Contrary to popular belief, Ren and Saber are not Illya. So, what else is left? Just a few more, Kohaku Smiley. The Fate Stay Night visual story is exactly what it sounds like, a picture book retelling of all 3 routes. Specifically, the 3 routes, so anything Illya route related probably isn't going to be touched here. Side note, but this book would have to be thick as hell for it to not even feel remotely like the UBW movie in terms of pacing. Like, when I mean thick, I mean like, hold on, like I'm talking like this thick, minimum. Like, Fate Stay Night is a lot, especially if you're going to be including it in like a picture book format. It would have to be at least this thick. The Fate Tiger Coliseum book probably isn't going to talk about it, as that seems to be about the Hanafuda minigame, which, if you're a fan of card games, is included in Hollow Ataraxia. But even if you're not a fan of card games, you should still go play it, as it has a really funny and interesting story. Apparently, I still haven't played it myself. Fate Unlimited Guide was another tie-in with the Dean anime, and probably wasn't going to cut it due to that. Lastly, the fan book, which is seemingly just all posters and art with one special interview, which, hey, doesn't that look familiar? Shame I still can't read Japanese. But hey, there could potentially be something here. And if there is, I will make a follow-up video down the line, but for now, let's talk about the proverbial holy grail of this little adventure. Fate Side Material. Released 1/30/2004. There's 2 side material books, however. One is a multi-part series that covers Type Moon as a growing company through the lens of the Fate series, which I desperately want to read one day, but as usual with most Type Moon-related content, remains untranslated. The other one, without the E at the end, is the focus of today. See, this was released alongside Fate Stay Night as a pre-order bonus, and if you'll recall roughly to what 2 minutes back, was plugged at the end of the trial edition. Thank you eternally to whatever uncredited translator or translation team out there did this miracle work. I'm not gonna lie, opening up this document, it's very easy to get thrown off the trail like I did 3 or 4 times, due to it covering very similar stuff to the character material book. But this has an entirely different interview than that. It's here that we realize that the grail we fought tooth and nail for was filled with nothing short of curses. First, the section on rejected routes. Rejected routes. Exactly what it sounds like. Routes that didn't make the cut. In the beginning, the plan was for Fate Stay Night to have 4 different routes, 1 for each heroine. It would start off by letting the player arbitrarily choose between playing as either Shiro or Ren. Then, around the middle of the story, they would finally meet, and after that, you'd branch off into one of the 4 routes for the last half of the game. Yeah, I don't really understand how it was going to work either. Anyway, getting back to rejected routes, it goes without saying that the Illya route tops the list. Besides that, there was also the Rider route, where you fight against Ren and Saber, and the Caster route, where Caster gets turned into a lolly and becomes your partner. While all traces of the Caster route were completely erased, the development where you teamed up with Rider was actually folded into part of the final story. If the Illya route had made it into the game, the diversion point would probably be on the 9th day of the Sakura route. Instead of choosing between being a superhero and choosing Sakura, there would be a third choice, where you could choose Illya. But unfortunately, as it stands, that choice doesn't exist. Now, you might not be seeing that Grail Med yet, and as a matter of fact, when I read through this little part myself, I didn't either. It's here where I was originally going to go into a long spiel about accepting things as is and end the video. That though we don't know why it was cancelled, that's just how it had to be. And how I, personally, learned to accept that. That video's sole focus was going to be on the Illya route, but to answer the question I asked at the start of this video, is Fate Stay Night complete? We have to look at the other choice quote for today. A quote simply about Illya von Einsburn herself. A semi-heroine, fuck you Nasu, Berserker's master. In the story, she was a mysterious girl who approached the still oblivious Shiro, calling him Oni-chan. She possesses innocence and cruelty in equal measure, and for some reason is interested in Shiro. The kind of character that makes you feel like angels and devils might just be the same thing. Her power as a master is the greatest in history, with a command spell engraved over her entire body and a magic circuit that overwhelms normal magi by an enormous margin. There is no doubt that she is an existence born for the sole purpose of winning the Holy Grail War. Though she played a key role in every route, her true colors were only revealed in the last one. Until then, she was just a worrisome child that got along well with Shiro despite coming to Japan to kill him. During the plotting stage, she actually had her own route. However, if we tried to make it, it would have delayed the release of Fate Stay Night by around another half a year. Rest in peace, Illya route. Pre-order 12/23/2003. Release 1/30/2004. Huh. Let's think back to that trial edition and then compare it to this quote. This trial still has Illya route stuff in it. I mean, just look at where the scene is taking place. I know, it's literally just a line of dialogue, but trust me when I say that context really is everything here. See, this line can still be found in Heavensfield after Nine Lives Blade works, and I don't have to tell you that that scene probably was an element from Illya's route that got folded into Sakura's route. In addition, the placement and likely premise of the scene would be reused a year later in Fate Hollow Ataraxia, which was always theorized to take scenes from the Illya route, but I'd say this all but confirms that little theory. Speaking of which, to answer the age-old question, the Illya route doesn't exist because of deadlines Type Moon pushed themselves into. First with the showcase at Tech Gain, and then again with the public release of this trial edition a few months later in October. They simply felt that it'd reflect bad on them as a budding company, which understandable I guess, but still a bit disappointing. This is all conjecture on my part admittedly, but you have to admit, the puzzle pieces presented fall into place exceedingly well. This raises another question though. With the route split happening at day 9 and with Nine Lives Blade works taking place near the end of Heavensfield, how would it have taken a year to develop the rest of the Illya route? As I still haven't found anything concrete, again, maybe there's something in the fan book, here's my personal theory. At the time of this trial's development, the Ren and Saber routes were already completed. I brought it up earlier, but in the flash of CGs that happens near the end, they only show CGs from those two routes, like not a lick from Heavensfield. Combine that with what we see from Sakura taking place near the very beginning of her route, and I think you might start to see where I'm going with this. In my personal opinion, I think the decision to cut Illya's route stems from a ploy to get more work done on Sakura's route. Regardless of what timeline we're in, the Sakura route was always intended to be last, and as such, should have a sense of finality to it. So in order to assure that that last route wasn't an unbaked mess, I think that Illya's route got folded into Sakura's route. I still don't know why this meant putting Illya on the shelf for all future Fate-related projects, or Type Moon's incessant refusal to do anything with all the time clearly spent on her route when, other visual novel publishers like Key, in particular especially Key, or produce entire visual novels if fans feel like one character got the short end of the stick. But hey, maybe they just felt like Sachan could use some company. I'm still clinging to this hope presented in the fan disc, by the way, at least until December 15th, which will be Tsukihime's 20th anniversary. When nothing's inevitably announced by then, expect a video titled something akin to The End of Faith. But back to the point. Is this all infuriatingly frustrating to someone whose favorite character got shafted due to deadlines and then has only proceeded to be stepped on since? Well, if I hadn't been burned on both Illya and then Sachan within the same year, I might be more passionate about this, but as it stands now, if Type Moon doesn't want to do anything with, as I see, their best characters, that's on them. I'm glad Fate Stay and Tsuki got released, but I guess they'll always just feel a little bit incomplete to me. But fuck, what work of art isn't filled with glaring holes if you look hard enough? Fate Other Night is a term I assume was made up by the fans at this point. If someone can prove me wrong, then please enlighten me in the comments, but until then, this interview was everything I was looking for. I mean, the 2-disc Fate Other Night theory is all but disproven here, as seemingly the original intention was to have all the routes on one disc, a la Tsukihime. The route split explicitly at day 9 is something I had structured my own little fan theories around, so I'm glad there's some merit to that. I don't get Type Moon's decisions. Well, post-2016 they're pretty easy to understand, but I'm talking about before that. The Sachan route was teased back in 2001 with the fan disc. The Illya route has its fingerprints all over Stay Night and is one of the major factors as to why that trial edition is interesting at all. Tsukihime hasn't seen any love in years despite a very, very popular Melty Blood scene and a teaser at the end of the manga for Tsukihime 2. Mahoyo has yet to receive any of the myriad of sequels planned, and I don't even have to talk about the Tsukihime remake, do I? All of those are planned pre-2016, yet not a single one of them has seen the light of day. It's a very all-over-the-place company looking at it like that, isn't it? But I suppose that is part of the charm. Passions were followed instead of the dollar, and that did lead to some very interesting stuff, but conversely, stuff that always felt like it was just missing that one little element. For all this stuff, which I highly doubt will actually see the light of day at this point, save for maybe the Tsukihime remake, Fate wasn't in the cards. Hence why you still get glimpses of Nasu appreciating Illya's original intent, while still obviously loving what was presented in the visual novel. Man loves both, but clearly prefers one to the other. And that's okay. You don't have to like what a creator or company does, and honestly, if the man's heart wasn't or isn't going to be in it, it's gonna be shit anyways. I mean, we've already seen Nasu when he doesn't care about what he's writing. Those early H scenes come to mind. And I doubt anyone would be coping so hard over the loss of an Illya route that they'd consider that good writing for an entire route. The only way to get an Illya route like it was originally planned would be a time machine, and the ability to speak Japanese, which I don't have either of those, sadly. I know I let you down. I've been a fool to my... Or, I guess the original materials could still be released if Type Moon keeps those around somehow. And if this video somehow gets any amount of views, which I doubt it will, but semantics, this isn't a call to action. I'm just stating what I feel like would be the only obvious way that any of this stuff gets out. So sit back down and let me answer that initial question. Is Fate Stay Night incomplete? Are you kidding? Yes, it was a rush job to meet deadlines. Of course it's incomplete. But does that mean it's bad? No, I'm obviously not blind to all the good spots in the visual novel. To get a bit elitist real quick, for the longest time I was just bitter about the lack of an Illya route to the point where it kinda misshaped my whole conception of the other routes. A trap I see many people fall into, at least in my little neck of the woods. I still love Heaven's Feel, but do I think it's a complete story for Illya's character? Yeah, for what it was going for, it was. Call it contrived or whatnot if you wish, but I'll still stand by her scenes being some of the best and most heartwarming things I've ever read. As I sit here typing this, and as I'm sure I'll be sitting here saying this a few hours from now, I have a big dumb smile on my face just thinking about them. But focusing exclusively on the what-ifs instead of what we got is a trap that, in spite of spending 50 plus minutes analyzing and reiterating in that Arcuate video, I hadn't applied to my own feelings towards this visual novel. I started writing my own Illya route out of bitter feelings and a drive to give this character what I felt she really deserved. And oddly enough, I think that's why I've been so lax on working on it, and by extension a bit burnt out on Illya month. Those passionate feelings come in the most crushing waves that feel like the most intense spurt of emotions you've ever had in your life, but ultimately they do always subside. The bitter feelings you have towards one particular piece of work shouldn't affect your day-to-day and how you perceive other works of the same pedigree. Now, looking back at what I did in Spite, do I regret any of it? No, Illya still definitely deserves her own route, and that's something I fully intend on writing my own spin on to add to the growing legacy of fan routes like Chaos Theory. But anything you do needs to be a labor of love, or when you're still working on it months down the line, it's not necessarily going to be the most fun thing anymore. And I love this character, man. But instead of applying that love, it was largely just me applying feelings of sadness towards the what-ifs. This little epiphany may not seem like the biggest change to you, but personally speaking, I feel a burden being lifted. You know, just the burden of not giving a shit, if you will. Do I want an Illya route? Yes, I think the past 20-ish, I can never tell the times on these things, minutes have made that perfectly clear. Do I think Fate's Stay Night is incomplete without it? Absolutely. We missed out on tons of Ainsburn lore, and the characterizations of Illya and Sakura are muddled due to that fusion. And lastly, do I think this journey of diving down this proverbial Illya route rabbit hole was worth it after coming to this realization? Yeah, did you see how much cool stuff we found? I mean, Fate Trial Edition may essentially be the reason we don't have an Illya route today, but it's still a really neat piece of history. And also, I didn't get the chance to talk about it in the video, but that caster route premise sounds interesting to say the least. But just as my surprising source of inspiration said in his last moments, sometimes the most beautiful things are the ones you were fated never to hold. I mean, hell, the lack of a route is why I'm here today, why I'm friends with the people I'm friends with. To be bitter about it when I could be talking with them, or writing my own spin on an Illya route, or working on the backlog of videos I still need to get out for this month. You know, just, it seems kind of insignificant in comparison, doesn't it? So, controversial take, I guess, at least for half of the people that follow me. I don't care that there isn't an Illya route. I mean, fans have long since filled that void for me, and Type Moon? Fuck 'em. Type Moon is a company that's known for never delivering anything 100%, and I think this is just a case of another time that happened. That proverbial grail mud I talked about earlier may seem damning, but ultimately, the only thing keeping you in it is you. Is it sad? Yeah, definitely. If your favorite character gets shafted, it's always going to be sad. Moping about won't change anything, though. You gotta go out there and show your love for this character in your own little ways, and this doesn't just apply to Illya. This applies to any character, any series, anything you're passionate about that you feel deserves better. You know, just instead of just lying about, thinking about the what-ifs, go out there, write that fanfic, animate that mad, write a video, record, edit, write a video that was supposed to be out 5 days ago. That's all I got for now, and I'll see you all tomorrow if editing hell doesn't render my soul from my flesh. So, despite the sunlight being out, good night, everyone. I'll see you all hopefully soon. Also, if this video comes out the day I think it's going to come out, and listen closely, because this will probably be the most important words I say throughout this entire video. Happy birthday, Illya.